But let's play Arlene's question, because we're including Arlene's question in the tone of this particular way in to talking about the therapy relationship.
I have a number of clients who are very alone. They're either divorced or what have you, and they live alone and suffer over that. And I know that we're all interactive in the sense that even if we're alone, we're interacting with fantasies and imaginary people or real people who were there or what have you. But I don't know always how to integrate the relational quality and the importance of that with the kind of aloneness that people struggle with sometimes. Loneliness and the aloneness and the suffering of it, really.
Thank you. Let's just take in what Arlene is saying and see what comes to us, how you understand that question, what it brings for you. Arlene is talking about several different kinds of relatedness or aloneness.
Well, it's a big problem for me because I used to feel very alone, and I actually panic at times when a client presents like that. And my mother felt very alone for many years after my father died, and I was called upon to be what kept her from feeling utterly alone. And when I get somebody in who feels that way, my feeling is hopelessness. I feel like there's really nothing we can do about this, but I'm supposed to, and I'm utterly, I feel incapable, but I think that's also a defense against, I don't want to have to deal with this.
When you say you think that may be a defense, that's a perfect focusing moment, right? To say, does that feel that way? Do you recognize this feeling of, I don't want to have to deal with this. I don't want to be the one responsible for keeping this person from going over the edge of annihilation.
I guess if I can say another word about it, just how to be enough of a subjective presence.
How to be enough.
Yeah.
As the present.
Permeate that boundary that feels so guarded or so far away, let's say.
You feel the boundary, Arlene, or the person?
I feel the boundary of the person, like
the boundary of the person.
Oh, it's hard to get in there, so to speak, and at the same time, I sense such a desire and longing for the connection and contactful sort of relationality that I find it hard to get
Right.
to have some fluidity or something.
Right. So for Liz, it's a feeling of the person's desperation for, and feeling overwhelmed by it, and also feeling resentful and rebellious, and like, I don't want to be the only one keeping this person in the human race or something. And you're saying, Arlene, for you, the configuration is like the client desperately needs to feel connected, but is also resisting connectedness. So you don't know how to make that happen. And you're feeling both the desperate need and the fear or dread
Kind
of
of
connectedness.
a sort of pushback from them.
Right. The pull push or something.
They're approaching it in the right way or something.
You're needing to know, you're desperately wanting to know how to approach it in the right way so that the nourishment that you could give could be digestible to the.
Yes.
This is Beth. I don't know how I would do this with someone who was brand new, but I have, for some reason, developed a number of clients who are dying or who are widowed and very alone. And my instinct is I want to embrace them. And so when it's on Zoom, it's harder to project that. But I think even during COVID, there were a couple of people that became very close. And it's kind of, I guess the only, I don't claim to be good at this or anything, but I want to say to them, what do you want to say? What is it that you need to say? And there, and most of the time I get something that they say, gee, I didn't think I was going to say that, or, I didn't feel I could say that. And that's the connection.
Wow.
Mm.
Very powerful. It's a very powerful invitation without being a demand. What do you really want to say? What's there to say? I remember once in the beginning of my career, I had a client that was very withdrawn and unable to articulate anything. And I invited her to finish the sentence. I really want to tell you that. And I would ask her to say that sentence and then see what came to her at the end of the sentence. And it was amazing how she was able to respond to that kind of question, which maybe other people wouldn't be. But I was struck by how she could go with that. So there's something about an invitation to say what's really there that is very powerful, very intimate, because in mostly our relationships, even love relationships, we don't experience the invitation to say what's really there, that the person really wants to hear us and know us and be with us in it. The principle that Jean talks about of maximum contact and minimum intrusion goes along very much with that invitation, doesn't it? The invitation to say what's really there.
With the aloneness, in a very delicate way, I find that it's a kind of vulnerability, but how does it feel to be in the room with each other? Because they tend to focus on long dialogue or monologues about the aloneness and how lonely they are, and often they're not. I loved what you just said, that the maximum contact and the minimum intrusion. So that's the delicateness of, but I can feel in the room with them and feel alone that they're not with me, or vice versa. And then in exploring that, it says in the present moment, which could be carried into the future, I feel that there is connection available. It just may not be recognized.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like we could say, and this is a little bit simplistic, but we could say that when we're feeling like there's a hunger, a need for connection, and that we're trying to find the way that that nourishment can be digestible for the person, or that experience can be one of joining together with it, joining together with the aloneness. One way that we know from focusing and from Jean is to experience the moment by moment feeling of it together, and to experience that togetherness brings the experience of being more connected to oneself and then more connected to the other. And those two go together completely, right? When I'm more connected to myself, I'm more connected to you. When I'm more connected to you, I'm more connected to myself. It's one system of connection to oneself and to the other. So Jean might say to that person that Stephen is talking about, is that feeling here right now that the person is describing? Is that here right now? What does it need? Is that between us? And this whole idea that what's between us is within us. There's nothing that's between us that's not within us, and there's nothing that's within us that's not between us. And one can sort of come at it from either end. Jean would emphasize what's within us. Is that here right now? Maybe a relationalist would emphasize what's between us. How is it to tell me that? How is it between us now? What would that need from me? Then there's, of course, the we also that I tend to bring in there. How can we be with this terrible aloneness? What does it need from us? We can come at this from different directions. The what's within, the what's between, and the we. And of course, then there's the I. I'll say just a bit about that. I think that recognizing the power of we statements and the power of I statements, as well as the power, of course, of the traditional you statements. You're feeling like this and this. The I statements are amazingly powerful, and they bring us together more. But sometimes they can bring us together in a way that that's not digestible for the client. It's not that's dangerous to the client if I make an I statement. But I find that I statements that I call expressive relating, that we used to call self-disclosure, I statements can be a whole variety of statements, from something very simple like the client comes in and says, oh, I'm so miserable with this cold. And the therapist can say, oh, yes, the cold weather is horrible. Or can say, oh, tell me more about that. Or can say, I can understand that. Or can say, any number of things, and can feel like, well, you're not supposed to comment on the weather or something, or free to comment on the weather. But to say an I statement would just be simply like, I think of spring as starting on the 1st of April, and I keep waiting for the 1st of April to come. Something that's personal and real, but not significant, is an I statement that immediately brings we're together having a conversation as two humans, two selves that are sharing. We statements also, where we've been suffering from a lot of rain this whole week or something like that. So what I'm trying to convey is that the I statements and the we statements don't have to be great big revelations, but they can be just a way of being that that can feel like it brings us together. Now, I think we have to say, and I think we all know this, but it's important to say, people connecting is so individual. And we have different, very, very different connective needs. And this is what we call transference, right? I may have the need, the relational need, to have a very intellectual, authoritative father that's going to protect me. And then it may not be the best thing for the therapist to say, oh, I can't wait till April 1st or something like that. It's so individual, but we're always using our felt sense to experience what that person is needing for the dance, for the invitation. And the invitation is always sort of the invitation of I want to be as close as you want to be, and I want to be as close in the ways that you want it, that you need to be close as I can, right? The maximum contact and the minimum intrusion. And we're sensing into what that will be, and very ready to change course when we need to. Say something and you see how it falls flat. And Gene would always say he was like with the gypsy woman that would say, you have very good friends, and the person would look downcast, and the gypsy woman would say, oh, they aren't real friends. You know, you're always sensing what the person is needing and being right there with what's needed. And what's needed, again, is not just needed for the person, it's needed for the growth of the relationship, for what that dyad needs to find the right contact, the minimum intrusion and the maximum contact. So we can't just be anything and say anything that isn't genuine, that isn't us. I can say what's me and what I experience from you, like in a dance. I can't make dance moves that my body doesn't do. I'm just giving you a moment to see what's there for you.
That's all very helpful, actually. It really is. And makes me realize I need to be a little more active in more subtle ways, like more open-ended ways like this.
Subtlety is so important because it's all in the implicit. That's what you said last time, Jeffrey, that I made a little clip of. Jeffrey said it's all in the implicit, right? All the power and the mystery of focusing oriented therapy, and the subtlety is in the implicit. It's the feeling into, and the principles help, but the principles just sort of make us more aware of the subtleties. I think the most important thing in focusing oriented relational therapy is this intention to be sensing into the relationship moment to moment, how that person is living in you in the tiniest moment, and how you're living in them, and what you're both needing as a team, what you're both needing in that moment. Are you needing a little levity, a little break from the seriousness? Are you needing a moment of silence? Are you needing a joke? Are you needing what are you needing? And you're doing that not from some intellectual perspective, but from the felt sense of what's needed between you and within you. And it what's needed may show up in the client, and they'll say something, or like last time, the example I gave you where the client said something about the conversation left him flat or something like that. It may show up in you where I feel like, oh, I don't feel you today in this way that I usually feel you. And I might say that to the person. I wonder why I'm not feeling your your energy the way I usually do in this moment, or I feel something a little flat in the way we're talking about this. Is feel that way to you? Or wow, there was a lot of energy when you said that, and it might have been something that you wouldn't think is significant at all that the person said, but then picking up on that energy and reflecting it. Probably you have known this little story, the story of perspective. I think the story was the story was a metaphor about very ancient times. And there's a stone builder, a stone mover, who is taking all of these huge rocks and moving them from one place to another. And asking the stone mover what he's doing, he says, you can see I'm taking these rocks and my job is to move them from here to here. And then the person asks the next stone mover, builder, what are you doing? And the stone mover says, oh, I'm taking the rocks from out of the way over here, and I'm moving them over here so that something can be built. And then you can imagine that the story could go on and on about the different responses, and the final response is the worker says, I'm taking this ancient rock and I'm putting it over there where it will be the foundation of a timeless temple that millions and millions of people will be worshiping in. Have you heard that story before? Some of you haven't heard that story. I love that story because it's so much like therapy. You know, you ask one therapist, what are you doing? And the therapist says, oh, I'm holding space for somebody and being very accurate about the time I put in, and I'm giving that to the insurance company and I'm making a good living. Or I'm helping people to resolve their problems. Or sometimes I'll say to taxi drivers will ask me, you're a therapist, what is that? And I'll say, oh, I help people to talk about their problems. Now I sound like one of those limited stone builders when I say that. And I sort of smile to myself, what should I say? what am I? But I'm helping people to express themselves better. I'm helping people to make their lives better. What am I doing as a therapist? Could be millions of things, right? If we look at the big therapy process, we are growing something together. We're growing a self. We're growing an ingredient of the world. We're growing something that is going to go on past our lives to generations to come. What are we doing as therapists? Are we making the person feel less lonely? Making them feel better? Or are we building the kind of relatedness that is transforming the experience of the self and will touch many, many people's lives out into generations to come? So when we're talking about the subtleties of moment-to-moment relatedness, we have all of these levels to think about.
Really beautiful, actually, to think about that rather than through one lens or another lens and the whole of a thing.
It sort of wakes you up at the end of the day when you think, oh my God, I had, 5 clients in a row, and this one is stuck and that one is giving me a hard time, and this one needs me to write down all this information for the insurance company, and what am I going to have for dinner? That kind of thinking about the importance and the meaningfulness of what we're doing and what we're doing in this very moment, right? This very moment when I respond to what the weather is like has all of this in it.